welcome to another episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today we also have Zishan back. Say hello, Zishan.
Hi, everyone.
And we have our guest today, which is Stefan Baumgartner. Is that right?
Perfect pronunciation. Yeah, hi everybody.
Well, I don't even know where to start because we were chatting quite a bit before the show. Maybe we should stick on the name topic for now because I'm actually kind of curious what this is all about. So before the show, we were talking about Stephen or Stefan is actually how you say it? Stefan, okay. So Stefan's last name has some relation to his background and I didn't quite understand, maybe because I don't speak German.
Yeah, so the word Baum means a tree and Gartner is just like a gardener, right? Stefan can correct me if I'm saying something wrong here. And so it's like a tree gardener. And since Stefan is very much attached to education, I think it's really fitting, this last name. And when I first heard this name, I was like, cool, this is like the most awesome name for a person who teaches people.
It's funny because I never made the connection. And now that you say it, it's really a nice metaphor because in Austria, we also have Baumschule, we call it a school for trees, which means that the Baumgartner comes in and plants trees and grows them up until they can be replanted somewhere else. I never thought about it, but it's very fitting. Cool. I should make that my brand.
Yeah, you should. Actually, because I learned German, so I, for me, these connections, they just come up, like I think about every word. And so, yeah.
Cool.
Well, I mean, the main reason we brought you on is because you're starting off this new, I don't know what you call it. Would we call it like a side project or I'm not sure what you kind of describe it, but maybe I'll just let you take it from there since I'm leaving it all a big mystery, right?
Yes, and especially since we are recording this before the first issue goes out, I guess there's even more mystery around the whole topic. But I guess you invited me to talk about the Shuttle Launchpad, which is an educational newsletter that I'm doing together with the folks from Shuttle, the cloud-native Rust hosting provider. And yeah, it's interesting because I'm working together with Shuttle on a couple of topics. And when we sit together this year to think about what we can do to, provide more educational material for upcoming Rustaceans or for people who want to get the feet wet in web development in Rust, to see the benefits of Rust in web development, they mentioned creating a newsletter. But usually, newsletters are most of the time linked lists. And I thought it's kind of boring having the next link list with the same topics that you might get from This Week in Rust or from any other newsletter that is community-driven. So I thought maybe we should give it another spin and create something that I would call educational newsletter, where you get not only links and information, but also tutorials that take you from A to B, like having a project that you can reasonably digest in, let's say, an hour or two, where you get all the information that you can write it, run it, and deploy it, and leave the extra and the additional information to, digging deeper into the topic, getting some YouTube videos that, strengthen certain things that you just learned, or maybe some more examples for some so-called homework. I don't like the term homework because it's very, very schooly, but you get it, like some more exercises, some more examples that you can work on your own after you did the initial step and after you did the initial development that you learned within the newsletter. And yeah, so this was my original idea, and we started talking about it in end of March, early April. It needed some fine-tuning until we both understood what we actually want to provide and what we want to promote. And now we're here just right before the first issue, and we are overwhelmed by all the great feedback that we got already, even though we haven't sent any issue yet. But it seems like we kind of hit the nerve with that, and this makes me very excited about the whole project.
Yeah, I just joined the Discord, and it seems like there's a ton of people, and that Discord channel is only for the newsletter, right?
You mean a Discord channel on Shuttle?
Yeah, okay, maybe it is actually for Shuttle itself.
Okay.
But there's a join us on Discord, and I thought that was only for the newsletter.
Yeah, so they have so Shuttle has a very active community. It's not only for the newsletter, it's for the whole product. But the newsletter was also very well received there. So I'm not too active on Discord, but when I see the Shuttle Discord, it's usually people hacking with the platform, creating a couple of projects, and you're exchanging experiences. So it's a really nice community there, especially if you are trying to get your feet wet in web development, which is, just as we talked in prior to recording, one of the big topics around Rust, because there's so many different niches, I guess, and web development is coming up even more.
I did want to ask you a quick question about Shuttle, right? Because I actually haven't heard of Shuttle before. Is it for hosting Rust projects? Because that's what I kind of noticed. Okay, it is.
Yeah, so Rust is basically abstracting cloud infrastructure in their framework. So think of deploying a Rust application to AWS. I guess it's mostly AWS. they're working with, but rather than you managing all the different parts like an EC2 instance or a database or whatnot, you just install a couple of dependencies, about a couple of crates, and modify your main function. So you say, I want to have this database, I want to have this secret store. And then based on those injections, Shuttle figures out which infrastructure to boot up the moment you deploy it. So you get a cargo CLI plugin, and with that you can just take your project as it is, your cargo project, run their build, run their deploy command, and then you're up on the platform, which is, for somebody like me who doesn't want to spend any time with infrastructure at all, a really nice way of getting all those things done, because I never want to deploy, start, and maintain a Postgres database on my own.
And do I understand correctly? Like, you download the CLI, you just deploy it immediately on their servers, and it's available immediately? Or do you need to test locally as well?
So you can test locally, and there's also a build process that you can try it out locally with their dependencies, of course. And obviously you need to log in. So you need to have a user account so they can make the connection which users are deploying what. But when you're set up with all that, usually you just write cargo shuttle deploy. Right. I guess it's cargo shuttle deploy. I'm just pressing the up and down keys on my CLI and hit the one that kind of seems the right one.
Right.
And then it takes your project, makes a release build on the infrastructure already, because you need to have it ready for the Linux operating system or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you wait a little bit, and EC2 instance is booted up, the software runs, and then you can use it. You're getting a URL, and that's about it. Yeah.
And I understood like it not only supports multiple backends, but it also supports like multiple databases and stuff.
I'm not entirely sure if they have other databases like the Postgres one, because I'm mostly using the Postgres database, but that's the idea. So the idea is that if it runs on AWS, you can inject it in your project.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the two things that I'm using mostly when I'm making my projects is the database, of course, the Postgres database, and the secret store, where you can provide access tokens, etc., also via their CLI tool. Then it's deployed on a secret store on AWS, and then you can read it with the dependency injected crate, which is quite nice. So, and I guess this is also the unique thing about the whole shuttle topic, that it's not a config file, it's not the next YAML or TOML that you need to maintain, but rather some line in your main function and the crate that you install. So
cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, super cool. I actually intend to use it for creating a service.
It's still in alpha, so it's really good to try stuff out and to experiment with it. And for an alpha version, it runs reasonably reliable. So the one project that I did with them last year in December, I guess still runs, which was some sort of WebSocket-based chat written in Exum. And every now and then I enter it because it didn't write anything to enter your name. You're just getting a number, and the number is increased. So I totally know how many users were there, because it's always the next number. And the last time I checked in, it was user 11,670. So
wow, cool.
That, yeah. And again, it's still running, and that's just the counter that keeps in memory. So that's quite nice.
It's in Rust, so it's like there's some stability guarantees.
Yeah. So one of the many points for Rust is so amazing, isn't it? So the reliability of the software is unmatched, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So you started using this for a while. So you started off using this because you were contracted to help work on the system itself, right?
Oh, no, I'm not working on Shuttle itself. So my history of Shuttle is that I basically came to them through a mutual. Somebody has seen one of my talks at Eurorust last year and said he really enjoyed how I was presenting the topic and how I was guiding people through the code pieces that I had there. They want to connect me with Shuttle because they're looking for people who can do webinars and workshops and stuff like that. So also educational things. So I connected with them, I got to know them, and we thought about creating a little application together and presenting them to a certain audience. And we targeted mostly JavaScript developers, because this is what I have been doing previously. So I've written mostly Node.js servers, lots of front-end stuff. And it feels unreal to say that, because it has been my main focus of development for the last 10 and 15 years. And nothing seems more distant now than writing JavaScript frontends after doing a couple of years Rust. But I definitely knew the pain points of JavaScript developers. So we said, let's target this audience and let's create the web application. That's what JavaScript people usually do, and see how the language works differently, but not only on a language level, but also on what can you do with it, especially in terms of error handling, in terms of stability, in terms of reliability. If we are true to each other, if you're writing a Node.js server, which mainly gets data from a database and puts it out on over HTTP. Node.js is really good at that because Node.js is really good at mostly waiting for, whatever call comes asynchronously. But if you want to do, for example, WebSockets connection, it's much, much easier to manage them in the asynchronous context of a Rust application. And one thing that was kind of by surprise was that I created the same application in Node.js, and it took us just, 15 lines of code. It was very easy, and it worked, the WebSockets-based chat. And then we did it in Rust. And in Rust, we found out that we had a major security hole because the messaging protocol that we decided to have for this WebSocket-based connection allowed to send anything over the wire and basically injecting lots of wrong stuff on the client side. So every person who connected with the chat had the possibility through a simple interface to send in, I wouldn't call it viruses, but something banned to the client side of every participant, just because our messaging protocol in Node.js allowed for that. And in Rust, we caught this error. We caught this error by, following some of those Rust typical rules, like having structs, serializing them, knowing which fields you have, having good types, knowing if an error happens, what should you do, and reacting to it. So because it forces you to do all those things, your software becomes much, much safer naturally without you needing to do anything else. And this was quite an aha moment because I for myself just realized that when doing the webinar. So I prepared myself a lot for this, but then I guess just an hour prior I said, oh, wait a second. I opened up a huge security hole and Rust helped me closing it. So that was quite fun.
What was the name of the protocol? I'm kind of curious.
Oh, no, it was not a real protocol. It was just you open up a WebSocket connection and you have this JSON structure that you send through it. And it had the name, it had the message, it had a couple of meta information so you understand what's going on there. And you pick it up on the client side, you read all those properties. And since I was a lazy person and not just picking up every property, I just spreaded them into the HTML. Just say, oh, those are all the properties, just roll them out because it's a, keyword value kind of list, which allows you, if you add more properties than there are, and you know that this is going to use some sort of inner HTML call, you can basically inject any markup that you want, which means that you can basically inject any JavaScript that you want, which means that you can get the entire site, grab nasty stuff, and do things without it. And this was just because everything that I did was grabbing messages from the clients and broadcasting them to all the other connected clients. And in Rust, I had this intermediate step where I needed to get to the actual properties by themselves, not just modifying one if it's there, but actually needing to serialize it and deserialize it again. And in this step, we found out that if I'm having more properties there than I'm supposed to have, something goes wrong, and Rust helps me.
Cool. I think we should go a bit more toward the background now, like get to know you a bit better, and then come back towards work again.
Sure.
So I don't know, we discussed a bit before the session that you're in Austria. Did we discuss it on the podcast already, or where you're based and stuff?
So I'm still living in Austria. I've been living here for over 40 years, and I'm close to Linz. So I'm in a little town just outside of Linz. So from my window, I'm seeing towards the big city. Linz is a 200,000 inhabitants sized city in Austria, the third biggest, which doesn't say a lot apparently. We are, I guess, not that well known, but we have we had originally lots of industry in Linz, and it's now in Austria one of the most upcoming cities in terms of software engineering, digital services, etc. So
nowadays it's very well known, at least in Rust communities. Everyone knows where Linz is because of
Rust Linz.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
I don't think I meet anyone in the Rust communities who don't know about Rust Linz.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me so happy because Rust Linz was a pandemic project from a friend of mine and myself.
Rainer, he was here on the podcast actually.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So Rainer and I sat together because we were interested in Rust. We're trying to learn it together, and that's why we created Rust Linz in the first place. So we wanted to have a group of people who are like-minded so we can find our way through the programming language. And we did it, since it was a pandemic project, we did everything online, basically. We invited lots of people from Linz, but also from the broader Rust community. We had a couple of in-person meetups as well. And I was very happy because Tim McNamara came from New Zealand to Linz to be there on site. Truth be told, he was just passing through, but still, it was really amazing to have him here. And yeah, so I'm always happy when I hear that people enjoy what we are doing, enjoy the videos that we are creating and the meetups that we are creating, because we are still a very small meetup groups. So the in-person meetups, would say around 20 to 40 people, but a very active meetup group. So people enjoy being with Rust Linz, and this makes me very happy.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of the best ones I've seen so far. So it's really good. But getting towards the Rainer question, like, how do you know Rainer?
Oh, I couldn't tell the exact moment we met, but we knew each other. I guess mostly from going to meetups and from meeting at conferences, and then chatting with each other and finding out, hey, moment, there's a lot of overlap in the stuff that we are interested in. We had also some pre-pandemic. We had lots of meetups and lots of conferences in Linz, and he always spoke at one of my conferences. Or we had the legendary Technologieplauschall, which means kind of technology chit-chat in English, where, he always was a guest speaker and brought in interesting topics. And that's how we got to know each other.
What I was trying to get to was like, it's not because of Rust that you know each other, but...
No. So I guess Rust Linz was Rainer's idea. He wanted to find people who are interested in that. And he reached out to me because I was one of the organizers of the arguably biggest meetup groups in Linz, the Technologieplauschall. And he asked me if I know somebody from our group that is interested in organizing it with him. And I said, yeah, well, I myself am interested in organizing it because I dabbled around with it also a little bit. So I actually got it from Ryan Levick, who was a guest on my web development podcast. He was talking about WebAssembly, and then typically Ryan fashion, he not only talked about WebAssembly, but a lot about Rust. And this is what got me hooked in the first place. Mm-hmm. And so I learned about the language. I tried, starting it out. It was kind of difficult at first getting into it. But then once I got it, I was eager to co-host a meetup group. Exactly.
Cool.
And yes, we were originally, I guess, 4 or 5 organizers. But then Rainer and I just stayed and brought it through. We haven't done that many meetups this year because of life. Things are very busy right now. But let's say after my big projects are done, which will hopefully happen within a month, I'm eager to continue it again and to do more meetups. Yeah. And one thing that we promised ourselves is that we always be online first. So even if we start out meeting in groups again and in person, having live streams and recordings will always be a Rust Linz thing, because this is what made us big. This is what was in our DNA from the very first day. So you can count, if we are doing more meetups, that you will definitely get more videos.
No, makes sense. So your day job is a product architect for Dynatrace? Is it Dynatrace?
Yeah, it's Dynatrace. Exactly. So I guess we spoke about it prior to recording. I'm basically having 2 jobs. But one thing, so my major day job is I'm employed by Dynatrace, which is we are creating a monitoring solution or observability solution. And with them now for, I guess, 8 or 9 years. And recently I became a product architect, which is, I guess, just a nice way of the company telling me that I shouldn't write any production code anymore, but rather spend more time in PowerPoint and draw boxes that are connected to each other. But the thing is, we just recently released an addition to our product, which we call the application engine, where customers and our developers as well are able to extend the Dynatrace product with extra user interfaces, but also with extra backend functionality. And my part in the whole thing was designing the serverless JavaScript platform that runs underneath, where people are able to execute any JavaScript code they like in our backend. And usually you would choose a solution that's already out there. There are many of JavaScript serverless platforms out there that work really, really well. The only thing that we had, which was kind of interesting, was that we allow everybody to open up a browser window, to go to a URL within our product and write in some JavaScript code in there, send it over to our infrastructure and execute it. And if you ever have written JavaScript, you know that allowing everybody to write anything in JavaScript can be a recipe for disaster. And this is why we had certain requirements on how we can execute it. So we were not able to execute it everywhere, for example. And we were also not opening all the features that you, for example, get with Node.js. And this was actually my defining Rust moment, because I was already dabbling a little bit with Rust through to Rust Linz and to Ryan. And this is a moment that I remember vividly, because I was at my car mechanics getting, the yearly check for my car, and I had an hour to kill waiting for that. I opened up the notebook and I was looking at the Rust V8 crate, which is Rust bindings for Google's V8 JavaScript engine. I was installing it. Oh, that is easy. And then I was connecting it to an HTTP endpoint that, gets the workloads in and trying to execute it. And it took me an hour while I was waiting for my car to actually get the prototype done because the bindings were so good. Rust was helping me along to get everything right and to not forget anything or any memory allocation. It was just really installing the crates, connecting those two things, and then I was done with it. And I came home from the mechanics. I went into the office and said, look at that. I just solved all our problems while waiting for our car. And obviously this got everybody excited. And this is where we decided to do our major first part of our product in Rust. Because the ecosystem was there. The results were good. And to this day, we have now been working for 2 years or so on this product. We could say it was definitely the right choice because we never produced software that is so reliable. So if we had any bugs, it weren't those nasty null pointer exception bugs or some things that we forgot or we were too careless about. It were mostly logic bugs. We still have those. If you forget something or didn't think about certain things, you still need to fix them afterwards. But we never had the problem that we forgot handling an error, forgot freeing memory or whatever. That just didn't happen. So this is really some of the most reliable software that we produced. I couldn't say it never failed, but it never crashed. I guess that's already something. It never crashed.
But I have to say that the first experience you mentioned, you were extremely lucky because I have had many people come to me and say that, well, they don't come to me, but I ask them like, have you tried Rust yet? And their answer is sometimes that, oh, I tried it. I tried just taking some sample code from different places on the internet and then I ran them and they didn't even compile. And I was like, you can't just do that. You can't just take random code and just, expect it to work. But sometimes they also remove things, right? Like someone said to me the other day, they tried the ZBus sample code from the README and it didn't work. So they just gave up on ZBus and Rust and altogether as well. I was like, you removed something from it that was very important.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so I had a similar experience just recently when I tried to integrate a C++ library in Rust through an intermediate crate that had a very strong opinion about how this library should work, but not a very strong opinion on my Mac architecture. So this did cost me several hours until I got this right. So I can relate to that. That's still nasty.
Yeah. And I think it's usually like people, especially from JavaScript background, they are more inclined to learn this way. Rust. I think we talked about it with Rainer.
Yeah.
The way people think about problems with their background. But do I understand correctly that you also have like a very heavy JavaScript background? You're coming from there?
Yeah, so I did a lot of things in the last 20 years. So I've also done C and C++ and C# at some time and Java at some time. But my main focus, let's say from 2010 onwards, was web development and JavaScript and mostly doing Node.js backends, but also, the typical front-end stuff. And yeah, so I enjoyed it for quite a while until the opinions in the community got way too one-sided, in my opinion. There was little room left for nuance, and this is when I got annoyed by everything and tried to look for something new. And this is where Rust came along. So it was the right moment at the right time.
What was this direction? What specifically was it?
So I had the feeling that at one point in web development, people were just reaching for the next hot take. Mm-hmm. And that, it's become a meme now that basically every second there's a new JavaScript framework released and people are very opinionated about it and very excited about it. And I get it. So, there's lots of cool stuff going on that helps people getting their job done. Be as much excited as you want it to be. But please leave some room for nuance and please leave room for other people's opinions. And this just didn't happen. So everybody was annoying everybody else. And I was in the middle of it and thinking, I don't want to surround myself with so much negativity and rather want to create cool things again. So yeah, this is where I kind of broke up a little bit with the whole thing, which is, tough.
Was there something from C and C++ that you missed in JavaScript?
And I'm so sorry, but I never missed anything from C and C++. So
not even efficiency.
No. So the thing is, when I was doing C and C++ back in the day, we did image processing, and there you need some high performance, obviously.
Yeah.
And for those use cases, I always used C++ back in the day, but since I got into web development, the use cases changed. And this is also something where I say, as much as I love working with Rust, and I'm still in the honeymoon phase with Rust, which means that I see it as the silver bullet for anything. I totally understanding that there are different use cases, and different use cases require different tools. And Rust is just a tool in itself.
Right.
And I totally get C++ is still the tool for some people. It's not for me, because I guess I wasn't a particularly good C++ developer back in the day. I always said the person who restarted the computer at my clients was my garbage collector, because he made sure that every memory foobar that I did was gone at the end of the shift. So thank you very much for doing that. And with that, I was also okay with it, But honestly, nowadays, with all the history and all the stuff that I did, I couldn't reasonably start working in a C++ project again. So I would be lost. I would be hopelessly lost. Not only because it's a tough language to work with, but also it has gotten so many new features and it has changed so much over the last 15 years that all the knowledge that I had, I guess, couldn't be applied anymore reasonably. Or it would clash with the knowledge from other people I would need to work with. This is also something, I guess, that we often overlook as developers who are excited or engaged with programming and programming languages, that programming languages are first and foremost still a means of communication between people. Otherwise, if you're just talking to machines, we would all write assembly. But no, we are writing code that should be understood by others. Mm-hmm. We are writing code that you want to collaborate on with other people. Right. And I can't see myself in a C++ ecosystem, because everybody knows the stories that it's not about what the language can't do or can't do yet. It's about all the history of it and all the different worldviews that have been established by groups who needed to solve the communication issue. So teams decided on a subset of C++ to get their collaboration working and to be able to work together on a piece of software. And I have a hard time figuring out what that would be. And it's not like that in Rust. So in Rust, you have a lot of syntax. You have lots of ways to express yourself. But the moment I read some Rust syntax, it becomes totally clear what the creator meant with that. And to me, this is much, much more important than having, this tiny little bit of extra efficiency because I can move pointers around on my own. Which is also something where I say, okay, I've been writing JavaScript for a long, long time, but I wouldn't want to write JavaScript without a little bit of TypeScript on top of it, because also TypeScript tries to solve the communication issues between developers who are working together. So yeah.
Right. Like I ask because myself, like I'm, from a heavy C++ background. So for me, whenever I did anything with Node.js or JavaScript, I always felt like it's so slow. And I would try to, replace it with the C++ or Rust. And that's where also my shameless plug come in that I was talking to Ellen about. And that last weekend, I found this awesome project called Gitmoji, and it's an initiative to add emojis into Git messages. And I looked at some of the projects that are using it, and it conveys so much information about, like, when you look at the Git history or the release notes with the emojis, immediately which changes you are interested in and which you are not interested in. So, and looks pretty cool as well at the same time. So I was really excited to see that, and I started using it. And they provide this tool in Node.js, and for at least on my machine, it was really easy to install. But when I used it, I realized it was taking 1 second, even if you just want to say -- help to get the help.
Putting up the runtime.
Yeah, they said, well, Node.js is slow. So I was like, oh, it's in Node.js. How about I write this in Rust, because it seems quite simple enough. Oh. And then I learned some frameworks, like for example, this framework called TUI, which is this command line interface creator. I figured out later that it's unmaintained. So now it's the fork that is maintained is called Ratatouille, which is even. But anyway, I'm using that, and I created the tool within 1 weekend. And yeah, it was, it's called Gimoji. It's like just Gitmoji, but instead of just remove the T. And it's really good. Try it out. It's in Rust. And
I need to check it out. So I guess if you're used to C++ and Rust, other software can feel slow, definitely. So I just had the same feeling when I was switching editors so I've been using Visual Studio Code now for the last, 5 years or so. And now I'm coding in editor called Sad. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yes.
And it's written in Rust.
We actually had the guy on Alan had the creator on the podcast.
Oh, I need to listen to that.
Zed, right? Z-E-D?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said sad. I was like, what is that?
Oh, no, that might just be my dialect. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No offense. I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, oh, you had him on the pipe. What? Sad? I don't remember this. Oh, Zed. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
So the one thing that struck me is that it's seriously, it's incredibly fast. And once you're known to that, it's hard to go back to something that feels inefficient. Even though I have had the notion that Visual Studio Code was was slow at anything. But just because I didn't know it would go faster.
Yeah, no, it is definitely, there is some slowness, I would say, there. I used Vim on command line for a really long time until like 3 years ago, when I switched to VS Code, and because of really good Rust support through Rust Analyzer and all that. And then came the GitHub Copilot as well. And it's so much better in terms of I can get more work done, but it's so like you can see that it's slower than just Vim. So I'm looking forward to using Z as well. If once
depends where you get your productivity from, Zishan. So if you get your productivity from being a fast code and having fast UI feedback, or do you get it from having Copilot?
Yeah.
But I totally understand you.
I'm sorry, just to ask some questions about this because a lot of people really care. There was some blowback about the licensing they had, right? And they had some weird conditions. Sorry, I don't want to say weird, but they had some conditions that people had some questions about. Right. That's been changed, I believe.
If I remember correctly, it was about collecting telemetry or something like that. So they had they had a paragraph in the license where they were entitled to collect telemetry without you being able to opt out or something like that. I don't know if this was even the real thing. I couldn't tell because there was the moment it came up, there was lots of opinion and lots of people were interpreting different things. So I really couldn't tell if this was the case. But there was a very weirdly phrased paragraph about telemetry in the license. That's true. But I guess they sorted it out real quick. So last time I checked my settings, all my telemetry flags were set to false, I guess.
Yeah. Are we talking about GitHub Copilot or Z?
Z.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't read the licenses for Copilot.
No, there's in Copilot, at least nowadays, there's an option to remove that. It takes the telemetry.
Yeah, so I guess people would be interested to not have the code broadcasted to web endpoints. So I can relate to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting to hear about that one. I haven't tried Z because it doesn't support all the languages that I use. But I'm kind of curious just to try it next time I want to start playing around with Rust again. I do remember having a long conversation, and they spent ridiculous amounts of time like looking at buffers and all this stuff that people would not usually spend time on. So like from the ground up, really, they spent a lot of time making it super efficient. So, and it's interesting to hear the two about VS Code in this. Because VS Code, like everybody goes crazy about. I don't know. I used it a couple of times. I use it now only because I have to, because they support something that I need sometimes. So otherwise I don't like to use it. It's the only editor that I've actually had crash on me, and I use IntelliJ a lot, which is surprising. For some reason, VS Code crashed on me quite a few times, and I don't know why. But yeah, I'm interested to try out Z.
It depends on what you're used to from using VS Code. You will miss a couple of things in Z. So one thing that thought I would miss were inlay hints, where you see what the type inference does in Rust. But now I coded a couple of things without it, and yeah, it's okay. It forces me to change my perspective on certain things a little bit, which is also quite nice. But one thing that is definitely amazing in VS Code is that you basically have a plugin or support for everything. So I couldn't think of a language or a tool or anything that is written in code that is not supported by VS Code. And this is the biggest strength, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I know they went really into that. But kind of coming back to, the work you're doing on Shuttle, things have just started now. Like you mentioned about a continual process, I believe. So are you saying like you must follow every newsletter that comes out from first to end? Otherwise, you're never going to get what's going on?
No. So this is a very good point. That's, I guess, one of the more tricky things when doing an educational newsletter that is also time-based. So usually if you get an educational newsletter, they are telling you that you get this amount of issues delivered every week. And the issues are all created and prepared, and you're just subscribing to it, consume it with breaks and consume it in a different way. And, get it from your mailbox, which might be actually quite nice. And this is something Shuttle and I decided to not do it like that, but rather have a continuous approach where you're getting a newsletter, I guess, every other week. We haven't decided on that yet totally, but it might be every other week, where we solve one problem that, can be reasonably solved with Rust. And this, of course, a couple of things that you need to get to know before. Like the first issue deals with setting up Rust cargo, installing the first dependencies, writing the first program, and deploying it so that you have the workflow and the setup ready. And once this issue is out, the moment you subscribe to your newsletter, this will be also the first issue that goes into your inbox with every new subscription, because this is the absolute basics. But from that on, you should be able to consume each lesson independently. I mean, it makes sense that you consume all the lessons because we are focusing on different aspects of Rust with every issue. For example, the next issue or one of the next issues will be talking to a payment provider like Stripe or any other third-party API and already learning a little bit on what it means to get the data from some endpoint in the Rust struct that you can work with. And obviously the main educational point of that is working with structs. So it's good if you read that newsletter or read that issue because you learn all about structs, and we most likely won't touch it in that detail or in depth in the following issues. But even if you don't read it, or if you can't find the time to work on it, or if you don't find it that interesting, every other issue should also be able to get you from start to the goal of this issue without requiring any other extra knowledge. So we are not relying on projects that have been done before. So we're not picking up where you left off. This is what is there for, extra steps that you can do on your own if you decide to want that, because, projects are never finished. You can totally extend them as much as you like. But rather, every issue should have a self-contained problem that has one major lesson, one major point that we want to stretch, but can be targeted from many angles. One thing that we're definitely doing is a web application where I can upload an image, and the image will be then modified with some sort of filters like grayscale filter or finding the focal point or stuff like that. Which is usually, if you work with a language like JavaScript or so, you are installing ImageMagick as a plugin and rely on some 25-year-old C code that runs as a dependency within your app. Or you are accessing the image data by yourself and make use of that multi-core machine by coding the task that you want to do on your own. And this is also where okay, this is why Rust is fantastic, because suddenly you are able to do that where you would have relied on other people's code at first. Maybe you had problems compiling that, or maybe you had problems getting the dependency, or there was a license problems, whatever. So many issues that could pop up there. Now it's in your hands that you can solve the problem on your own without relying to anybody else. Because, Rust enables you to do that. And yeah, this will be the issue where we focus on parallel execution in multiple threads, getting, the number of cores that you can execute on, synchronizing the results, working, having join handles, etc. What does it mean to splice image data so you can distribute it on several processes? All stuff that you usually wouldn't care about when you're writing a Node.js application, because, you can't really work multi-threaded in Node.js. But, getting that power and learning about that might enable you to do different things later on. And this is also, one of the biggest strengths, in my opinion, with Rust, that you have this compiler and guide that helps you working on problems that you wouldn't have thought you would be able to otherwise. I sincerely hope that it works out like that, because our goals are pretty high and our motivation is very big. And I hope it will resonate with the audience as well. I'm very excited about the whole project, and I'm pretty sure there are some really cool issues with that. I mean, issues that we send. And I'm kind of sad that the first one will be installing cargo and getting a Hello World deployed, because it's, compared to everything else that we are doing, I guess one of the most boring things, but also the one thing that needs to happen so you can start.
Talking of teaching Rust, what do you think is the hardest concepts that you have trouble teaching people, when you're teaching?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a very good question. So I originally said that I have two jobs. One is the one thing in Dynatrace. My other one is teaching and training people Rust and TypeScript. Whoever wants to learn it, I'm there to teach it. And I would say it really depends on the audience, on their prior knowledge. Funnily enough, the whole thing about ownership and borrowing and references was never that hard to grasp for folks. I thought that asynchronous programming might be a tough topic, and it is if you either lack a certain knowledge in working with asynchronous code before, or if, I wasn't prepared to teach them everything from the beginning. But even that is something that people manage, except that some of the error messages can be really, really annoying when you are in hundreds of lines of stack traces with generic errors. But I would say the toughest things that happened when teaching Rust were very complex and elaborate trait bounds in trait implementations, especially when I do things like implementing a service trait, a tower service trait with them, where you need to somehow define within your trait bounds on how the future that you return should look like. And making that compile time ready and making it integratable with the one line where you then actually use the service in the stack of other service that you're using it. this can cause some headaches because the error messages are not that helpful yet. You're basically just doing that workaround because you can't have any async methods in trades. That's why we are doing that. Suddenly the whole syntactic sugar brittles because you're looking deep at what's going on underneath. And if you don't understand what's going on underneath, it will be hard to understand how to solve that. And you end up with long lists of trade bounds and you're slapping sand and sync and tick static onto everything to hope that it will finally resolve.
Right.
Without proper guidance, this caused the most headaches so far, in my experience. Also, then if you have things like, I forgot the name about it, but where you have the trade bounds with the for keyword. What was the name for that again? Higher order trade bounds. Higher rank trade bounds, exactly. Higher rank trade bounds. So let's say everybody understood all the generics and all the trade bounds. And then suddenly you come along an example that has these higher rank trade bounds with the for in it. Everybody goes, what? So what did I just read? And this is also where I say, there's the Rustanomicon, everything is explained there, but people can be scared to read it. And also, if you look at setting or at the scenario where I'm teaching that, it's usually a 3-day workshop where I work with people and we're getting from this is your hello world and this is how ownership and borrowing works. And at the end of the day, this is a higher rank trade bound in a tower service. This is a lot to digest. And this is maybe too much for this kind of format where you have 3 days. This is also why I usually now try, if I'm doing remote workshops, which is what I do mostly, where I try to say, let's rather spread it out over a couple of weeks instead of having it condensed in 3 days. And also maybe just have half a day instead of a full day, and then give people some extra homework and let them work on their own project so they can internalize everything before we are continuing and working on the next thing. And the way you teach and the way people learn then can make the difference, really. I try to avoid it as much as I can. But
I understand completely.
Yeah, but pinning is also high on the list of concepts that get people confused. Yeah.
I recently did some presentations at my workplace, right? At Mercedes. I thought that I would have a hard time explaining pinning, but turns out that I didn't have any trouble explaining at all. And there were other things that I thought they would be easy to explain, like associated types. And I just failed in explaining, at least on the first attempt. So I had to explain again the next time and prepare for it because it's really hard to explain sometimes. Like you forget, right? Like you code Rust every day, but then it just goes in the back of your head. Why do you need associated types when you have generics anyway? So yeah, that was the hardest.
And those are the things that can catch you off guard if you try to teach Rust to people, because it's really hard to overlook the state where you are currently in, so with your knowledge and with your experience, and map it to everybody else's knowledge and experience. So getting this connection and trying to get everybody on the same page early on is, I guess, one of the toughest things when you need to teach Rust. This is also when I work with clients, I have lots of questions to them when I start, and none of them is about, what are you usually coding, etc., whatever, but more on what tools did you work with before and how are groups working together, which gives me a good sense on how they need to communicate on stuff. Do you have lots of juniors? Do you have lots of contractors? Getting to understand the group and the company and how they work together is usually a much, much better indicator on how to talk to them to get everybody on the same page rather than actual knowledge and experience, because this differs everywhere anyway.
Yeah, overall, I'm interested to see kind of what's the next episode's going to be like, what's in the pipeline. The interesting part is that you're not committing for how long, but it's more like you're committing that it's going to be endless, which I thought was a little bit interesting.
Yeah, that's also a very, very good point. So with Launchpad, to give it a little bit more context, so originally I thought this would be my project with Shuttle as a sponsor, helping me to, getting the little bit of motivation to do it every other week, because like everybody, I have lots of projects on my table. And shortly before we announced it, we thought about switching it or making it the Shuttle project instead, because if I should run out of ideas, out of motivation to get new examples and to find new content for it, I can be sure that the project lives on and maybe changes to something that is, still educational, but maybe has another format that I would not be interested in doing that, but which still might fit the audience and which still might fit the needs of Shuttle. So with that, I can kind of secure that the project will be ongoing for how long it needs to go. So right now, our content plan is about 15 to 20 newsletters already planned, which gives us, about enough content for, let's say, a year or so. And what goes after that, let's see. So we couldn't tell anyway, because, it's in a year from now. But we are open to allowing the project to change and to take other forms. If we see that the one format that you tried to do and tried to create suddenly wouldn't fit the audience anymore or wouldn't fit the contents anymore. I doubt that it will go back to a linked list as it was originally conceived, but there are many ways, to communicate Rust to people. And even some ways that I haven't thought about it yet. So this educational newsletter stuff is also just something that I'm trying out and see how people react to it. And
when you say linked list, I'm old school. So I have some old terminology in my head. Like, is it mailing list you're talking about, or?
No, like getting a newsletter where all the contents are basically links to other resources. So which means that the task of the newsletter creator is mostly curating it and finding interesting enough content to distribute.
Okay.
This Week in Rust is a linked list newsletter, which is, perfectly curated. I enjoy reading every issue and I've always find very interesting topics in This Week in Rust.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also why I thought, what value would another linked list newsletter?
Yeah.
So maybe let's twist it around a little bit and try something new. And I mean, this speaks for the Rust community in general, I guess, that things like This Week in Rust exist because somebody in the community took on it and created this kind of newsletter and maintains it now for I don't know how many issues, 500 issues or something, for many, many years. If I'm doing my own spin on that, and even with something that is, sponsored by a company, it just wouldn't have the same vibe as a community-curated newsletter. So it should have at least some different content.
Yeah, I also had the question about this linked list thing, because every time I think about linked list, I think about the linked list data type. I'm like,
yeah.
Because that's also a popular tutorial, right? How to build linked lists in Rust because of the ownership issue.
Yeah, exactly. You're totally right. I guess everybody read this. Was it a book? It looked like one of those Rust books, but I can't remember the full title anymore. Learning Rust with way too many linked lists or something.
Yeah,
like that. Is it
something
that?
like that,
Yeah, exactly.
It was actually funny because once tried to teach someone Rust through linked list, like by creating a linked list. I didn't know about that tutorial yet. And I failed so miserably that I realized how much I don't know about Rust. And I realized I need to learn a lot more before I can, do this. And yeah, so then I realized that, it actually is a harder problem in Rust than other languages. It's just that.
I love that there's this one error message from the Rust compiler that tells you to use a box on an option on a node, which is basically you're trying to create a linked list in Rust error. And here's how to solve it. And I'm pretty sure, since Tijan is smiling, so I'm pretty sure you got to this error message as well at some point in time.
Probably. Memory is really horrible. So
okay, that's yeah. I always find it interesting. I feel like for once we have too many tutorials in one space. Is everybody talking about this problem? Because it is not straightforward compared to other languages.
I mean, the topic of too many tutorials is interesting because I think that Rust has a lot of material for people to get started and to learn it and to, find something for their niche. So one thing that I'm totally amazed by is the Rust on embedded books that's out there. I have never read it through because I have the microcontroller on my desk and never started it, but this is something that I'm going to do soon. But just knowing that you find resources to do that and get all the material to get going is fantastic. And this is something that I haven't seen in any other community or with any other programming language to that extent. But what I think is that, people learn differently. And I'm pretty sure there are ways that haven't been checked out yet or approached yet on how people can learn. There are lots of people who learn great by watching other people code on YouTube. I'm not one of them, so I get distracted too easily if I watch some other person code. I rather read articles and books and things like that, but whatever works for you. And if reading an online book works for you, if watching a YouTube video works for you, if getting those chunks, or maybe even listening to this podcast or to other podcasts and kind of figuring out how the code could look like the stuff that we are talking about, it's just as a valid way of learning things. And I'm pretty sure that there are many, many more ways on how you can learn. And we haven't approached all of them yet. So,
yeah, I mean, we touched on quite a few, so much topics within Rust. I think we have quite a bit for our episode. And I can try to push this episode a little bit sooner so that way we kind of get it in time for the upcoming release of the first issue, right? So you get a nice boost They could be good to
Oh,
have.
that would be nice, yeah.
Well, how would you say that in German now?
If you want to push it through, or if you want to release it early.
Yeah, you got to say like super, something like that, right?
Oh, you caught me off guard. I need to think about it. So the problem is,
think about your own native language. I don't know what
no,
to say.
no. The thing is, I have to admit. So the way Germans say things is vastly different than how Austrians say things. So I'm currently in between what is a proper phrasing for German people, what is native in our language, or what is just stuff that I know from, talking a weird Austrian dialect for 40 years.
Oh. Well, how would you say it then? Let's try it that way.
Ja, ein bisschen aufs Gas drücken.
This rolls off the tongue, I think.
Yeah. And the most important thing is to have this bissel at the beginning, because, it kind of puts away the pressure of everything. So bissel means, I guess, a little bit. Yeah. So we are usually not too pushy in Austria. We are more like, let's stay a little bit more relaxed. Let's look at it first and decide later on.
All right. Thank you for the culture of Austria, because I'm still still learning my way around. Yeah, I find Austrian people are a little bit more, maybe more polite when it comes. I had an interesting discussion with an Austrian guy where he wasn't being so direct as I would like for him to be. He's very friendly, but then behind the doors he was saying some like, some not so nice things, but not like really bad, but just like he was stating his opinion to somebody else, and I thought that was a little bit sad. I just said, just talk to me. It's okay. Yeah, I don't know if it's every culture has their own style, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not one of them, so I'm not talking behind other people's backs, but I can see how this is an Austrian trait, that people are very polite and very nice in the front, but then, are maybe, I'm lacking the English word. Is it cussing? No, it isn't, is it? No, forget what I said. Doesn't matter.
Do we need to like scramble your voice and change your name? Because I don't know if you're going to be welcome in your place anymore.
Oh, no. This is the other thing. So I guess every Austrian understands that you complain about other Austrians. The culture of complaining about things,
All the Austrians I know complain about other Austrians. So
yeah.
But then again, if you really think about it, it's true for up to some extent, at least for every nation.
Yeah, you need to understand that we Austrians are complaining about everything. We even have 3 different words for that.
For complaining?
Yeah. Jammern, Sudern, I can't think about the third one, but Sudern is very, very strong in Austrian culture.
Oh.
I deferred over to Zishan. He's my only link from English to German in terms of that.
You have a very weak link.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a weekly linked list over here.
Yeah. No, my kids speak German, right? Almost like a mother tongue. So I often ask them something, how do you say that in German? And they're a bit baffled, like, we don't know. I don't understand that. Like, how come they don't know? I don't know. So it's like, don't ask me how to say things. If my kids can't answer, I can't either.
My kids speak much better German than I do also. So they are talking high German. I can't. So I'm usually very thick in dialect. So
they also teach me words in English nowadays because they are like speaking the new language. Okay. And there was a term that was talked about in this podcast like a while ago when I first encountered it around the same week, I think. It was yeet. I think, yeet.
Okay.
And they're considering it as a keyword in Rust, actually.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I found something like, yeah.
I heard them saying it and I was like, that's not a word. And I was very insistent. They said, no, it is a word. You don't know it, Grandpa.
I need to Google that.
Yeah, yeets. The first time I saw this word was in a YouTube video. This guy I don't know what he was talking about, but basically it's about throwing something. He kept using the word yeet, and I was like, what is that? And I feel like an old man, like I'm like, what is this term? And I look it up and it seems like it's used quite a lot in younger generations, I would say. I'm an older guy now, I guess. Feels weird to say that, but yeah, I guess it's just a term of throwing, or that's like the original word. Is it actually a German word? I have no idea.
No. It's not. It comes from English, I think.
It's an English thing. Okay. Yeah, I often hear that word, and it means or at least Rush is keeping up with the Joneses, as we call it. It's keeping up with terminology nowadays. So that's good. We're still relevant, right? I don't think any other language has the term yeet in it as a keyword. So it's marketing, right? But kind of going back to kind of wrapping this thing up, since we've been doing this for quite some time. Maybe let's kind of plug I think we should plug 2 things, right? Maybe let's start, since you're the guest, Stefan, we'll end with yours, but Zishan, you can plug your thing one more time for people to make sure they know how to get to it. and then we'll end it with Stefan's.
Yeah, well, sure. I explained it already. So it's like a Gimoji. It's based on Gitmoji, but it's written in Rust. And it's something that can install a Git hook for you, that when you write a commit message, it automatically gives you a choice to choose an emoji for your commit message that can represent that commit message. And like the emojis, the collection of emojis, they are tailored for writing commit messages. So there's a collection of emojis that would be good to represent specific topics like CI, adding some action in the CI, or fixing a broken CI, or fixing a lint, and things like that. So they're handpicked for those. So it's not just like, people say, oh, I can just pick up an emoji very easily in my editor. Well, you can, but it's not exactly the same. So yeah, try it out, Gimoji. And if you like it, you can keep using it. If you don't, you can remove it. It's easy. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. Yeah, I did see that on your LinkedIn. I'll have to go check it out. Stefan, please.
So we are talking about the Shuttle Launchpad, an educational newsletter on all things Rust, and it's on shuttle.rs/launchpad. And most likely when you listen to this episode, the first issue will have been sent out already. But if not, you are always welcome to browse through the archives and, subscribe for more issues directly to your inbox. And it's so great that I've been able to talk about the project. So seriously, I'm beyond flattered to be a guest on this podcast. It's like a little dream coming true.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing else that you kind of want to end off with, then I think it's a good time for us to wrap it up. We went through a lot of stuff today, so hopefully we'll keep people on the edge of their seat waiting for the first release of the Shuttle Launchpad. And with that, thank you very much for coming on, and hope to have you again soon.